Welcome, everyone, to Ask a CEO. I'm Greg Demetrio, your host. My day job is CEO of Lorraine Gregory Communications, which is an integrated marketing company here in New York. My fun job is being the host of this show, which chronicles the journey of CEOs to the corner office and what it's like running their companies on a day-to-day basis. Today's guest is Anders Jones, and he's the CEO and co-founder of Facet Wealth, which is a registered investment advisor company. He's a technical entrepreneur. He's an early stage investor and board member with experience building and scaling companies. His current focus is changing the way that high quality financial advice is delivered to the mass affluent market as the CEO of Facet Wealth. At Facet, he's overseen all aspects of the company's growth, from the initial product innovation to service delivery on a national scale. From his work at Facet, Anders was named Investment News 40 Under 40 in 2019. He's an early-stage tech investor as a partner in Argyle Ventures. His investing is focused on technology-enabled services in emerging tech hubs outside of Silicon Valley. In fact, he moved from San Francisco to Baltimore to start Facet and has grown the team to 100 plus headquartered there. He holds a BA from Stanford University and an MBA from the Wharton School. Welcome to the Ask a CEO show, Anders.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Greg. Really appreciate it.
Oh, no, I really appreciate it. I love my job here. This is my fun job. I'm a CEO of a marketing company, but my fun job is talking to other CEOs. I always learn something, right?
Always.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, we should always be learning, right? I think
always.
As an early aside, I would say that that's probably been my biggest realization as a CEO is the importance of setting time aside to learn, and also that you can learn from industries and pursuits and whatnot that have nothing to do with your job or your company.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited to talk to you today because you have a very interesting background with your tech investing, your startups, and growing companies. But before we get to that, maybe you could tell us a little bit about Anders Jones.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess I begin at the beginning. So I grew up in Boston and stayed there for 18 years, went to college at Stanford, so moved to California, and was, in retrospect, lucky enough to graduate in 2009, which sounds like a weird statement to make, but when I graduated, 75% of my class didn't have a job, which coming out of a place like Stanford is pretty extraordinary. It gives you a sense of just how bad things were that year. Arguably, just as bad, if not worse, than graduating this last year in 2020. But being in Silicon Valley and sort of being in the middle of all of the startup zeitgeist, I guess. I joined the early team of a company that ended up becoming LiveRamp. So I was the 8th employee there. LiveRamp is an advertising technology company. This is a big oversimplification of what we did, but if you've ever been shopping online and if the thing that you've been looking at for the last or the thing you've been looking at follows you around for the next 2 weeks.
Yes.
We had a hand in that. So sorry about that.
No, that's okay. I know it very well. We do the same.
Yeah, there you go. So LiveRamp actually is now a public company. It's I think a $5 or $6 billion market cap company. So it was cool to be part of that early journey and get a sense of what the startup life cycle really is all about. Because as cliche as it is, it's not a straight line to success. There's a lot of ups and downs and a fair amount of sideways as well. And I think after that experience, I realized that I wanted my whole career to be in the startup space and as an entrepreneur, not working for a big company and not in a sort of boring, growing at the rate of the economy kind of place.
That's funny that you should say that, because in my mind, a startup is a heavy lift, right? You have to take it from idea to implementation. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that, because it scares the crap out of me. I mean, I'm a 30-year company here, and I'm very comfortable doing what we do, right?
Yeah.
For me to say I'm going to have a startup next week, that ain't happening to me. So
Yeah.
Maybe you could tell us why you liked it so much and what it's really like to do that.
Man, I mean, that's a big question. We could spend the whole time talking about that.
Feel free.
Yeah. I think there's a few things to consider. So, one is startups by definition are trying to change the world in a meaningful way. And that can be anything from changing the kind of cars that we drive to changing how we interact with the internet to, in our case, changing how financial planning is done and who it's done for. And I think in order to start a company, you have to have a very clear vision of what the future looks like. And you have to be relentless in getting there, because this is one of those cases where, there's that saying, the best way to predict the future is to create it. And so as soon as you sign up to do a startup, you have to kind of, sign on for that level of fervor. Um, and it's definitely not for everyone, but I would say there's two stages to it. And this is again a big generalization, but the first part is the sort of creation stage where you have an idea, you think you see a problem, you think you understand the solution for it, and you think there's a big enough market for it. And oftentimes the first idea that you have doesn't work, or it doesn't sort of fit into that box really neatly. Every now and then someone gets lucky and you got lightning in a bottle, and companies like Facebook, I think, are a great example where they just, sat down and they were the right place at the right time with the right product and off it went. But most startups, it doesn't happen like that. And then once you find product market fit, the second phase of the company begins. And that's where you have to scale it. And that's a whole different set of problems and challenges. The thing about scaling a company is you have those playbooks have been written and run before. And so you have a broader pool of people that you can hire from to come in and do those tasks. It's not all about reinventing the wheel of actually scaling a business. But for each phase, they come with their own challenges. They come with their own sort of unique set of people that are good at them, and different levels of discomfort and different levels of reward and opportunity. It's a thrilling ride.
I'm sure it is. You've proven that already, and now you're into investing in tech startups and so forth. But what caught my eye was the fact that you moved from San Francisco to Baltimore to start Facet Wealth. And I know you've been recognized as a top tech company, but maybe you could tell me what that move was all about.
Yeah. So let me tie this back a little bit to my personal story. So what happened with LiveRamp is we actually it was bought by this company Axiom, big marketing services company, and then subsequently got spun out as a public company. So and I left just prior to the acquisition. And so, but after that happened, I was doing some early stage investing. So I wanted to try out the other side and invest in early stage tech companies. And one of the big theses that we had was we were sitting in San Francisco at the time, and we said, okay, there's actually opportunity everywhere. There's innovation everywhere. There's talent everywhere. And as we get more interconnected online, there's less value in being in San Francisco or being in New York or a major tech hub. There's actually comparatively more value at being in an emerging tech city where there's probably more attention and cheaper resources available to you without sacrificing on quality. So we started investing in companies outside of Silicon Valley in these emerging tech hubs. And one of the places that we did 3 deals was in Baltimore. And so I got a sense of the tech scene in Baltimore and was really impressed with what was going on at the time. This was mid 2015. And then when we started Facet, I said, okay, let's take a page out of our own playbook. And I moved to Baltimore, recruited the founding team, and said, let's make a bet that we can start a fintech company in Baltimore. So that's what we did. And now we're 250 people. We're not all in Baltimore. We're actually now sort of distributed around the country. We're in 42 different states, but the core of the team started and mostly remains in Baltimore. And it was a bet that really paid off.
How did COVID affect that?
Well, prior to COVID, we were actually virtual first. So we had, right before COVID hit, we were probably about 100 people, and I'd say 40 were in the Baltimore office and 60 were distributed. And so we'd already sort of developed a lot of the systems and processes that we needed to run a virtual company. So we closed our office on a Thursday, and Friday was business as usual, and we didn't really miss a beat.
Yeah. When COVID hit, I interviewed quite a few of my colleagues here in New York about COVID and what it was doing in their company. I have to tell you that they were all made that change. The ones who were more comfortable, obviously, made that change quickly to remote, and they were able to get the processes down fairly quickly, which gave them the confidence that they could ride the storm out. So the fact that you identified that and you were already virtual gave you a head start. Talking about head starts, you're an investor in startup companies and early stage companies, right?
Yeah.
When you're looking at those companies in terms of a deal, what are the most important things that you're looking at besides just management? Maybe you could give us a little thumbnail about what your thinking is when you're going to put the money on the table.
Sure. So I think a couple things to start. First is that since we started Facet, and I've been, my number one job is CEO of Facet, so my investing pace has slowed way down. I still do a deal here and there, but not nearly at the pace that I was. But I'm excited to get back to it at some point, because I think having now run a company and sort of gotten through even more of the life cycle than I had previously, I know a lot more, and I think it'll help. It definitely helps with the investing. But to your question, in the earliest stages, I think honestly the only two things that matter are the team and the TAM, total addressable market, because you don't know what the right answer is. In a lot of ways, startups are about seeking truth and understanding what works and what doesn't. And you're really in a race against the clock to discover what the right answer is. And the only way to get there is to iterate as fast as possible. There's this great saying that I'll steal from Ben Horowitz, who wrote an awesome book on entrepreneurship called The Hard Thing About Hard Things. I don't know if you're nodding. Have you read it?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a great book. But he has this great line in there where he says, "There's no such thing as a silver bullet. There's only 1,000 lead bullets." And I would append another phrase on there, which is, "And your success is determined by how quickly you fire them." And so anyways, I'm going down a rabbit hole here.
That rings very true to me, because I'm an old New York City detective. So the faster you can fire the bullets, the safer you are.
There you go. Exactly. It's never one shot, one kill in the startup world.
There you go.
And so, I think for me, when I'm evaluating an early stage company, knowing that, and with that is sort of the universal truth of startups, that whatever you start out doing today is not going to be the same that you're doing a year from now. Then it's really about, is the team adaptable, and do they already have that mindset, or are they very set in their ways? Do they think that they're right, and they're going to sacrifice long-term success because they have that sort of egocentric mindset that they need to be right now? Or are they saying, this is an interesting problem, we have an idea about what the solution is, and we have 10 more ideas that once we sort of test the first one might add on to it and to get us to the right answer. If you talk to an entrepreneur and they start talking like that, then you know that you found someone you really want to back, and it almost doesn't matter what the problem is, they're going to be successful. And then the second one is around the TAM, the total addressable market, which is, how big is the problem that they're solving, and how many people, how big could this company get? There are a lot of entrepreneurs that have an idea, they think it's really cool, they design this whole product around it, and then you look at it, it's like, well, if you captured 100% of the market, you'd be a $30 million a year business, which for some categories of business is a great outcome. For someone who's writing venture capital checks, where you lose 98% of the money that you invest, and the other 2% has to return everything else, you need big outcomes. You have to have the possibility of a big outcome, or else it's just not worth it.
That's interesting. That's interesting you put it that way. It's absolutely correct.
Yeah.
So now, as the CEO of Facet, right,
Hmm.
you oversaw the concept, the ideation, the architecture, and of course, the funding. Now, I know you've been able to acquire some venture capital yourself. Maybe you could tell us what the search for venture capital is like and how you secure it.
Yeah. So we've raised, for context, we've raised about 62 million bucks. So we've definitely raised a fair amount. Um, our primary backer is a firm called Warburg Pincus, and they're based in New York as well. Big growth equity fund. They were actually a very non-obvious choice, both us for them and them for us, because they typically are like, buying multi-billion-dollar companies, and they initially invested $33 million in us in a minority investment, which was a very strange deal for them to do. But we've been very lucky with them, and we were very lucky. They have deep experience in financial services, and they came to us. They actually found out about us, and in 2018, basically, essentially cold called me and said, "Look, we have a thesis on the future of wealth management for, in their terminology, the mass affluent, but basically, folks who have somewhere between 100,000 and $1 million of overall net worth."
Mhm.
And they said, we have a thesis on the future of wealth management in this space. And you guys are doing, we have a 60 slide deck, and 58 of the 60 slides you guys are doing. And so we have so much conviction around this that we're willing to be flexible in how we invest to to be partners with you going forward.
That's awesome.
It really was. And so I think for us, the big realization that I had there, and I should say, so that was in 2018. So we're now 3 years into it, and they wrote another $25 million check last year, and they've been incredible partners, and they're very aligned with us in thinking about what's the kind of company that we're going to build in the long run. Not, hey, how do we sell this thing in 2 years and get a fast exit? It's how do we build this into the next Fidelity, the next
So are
Schwab.
they operating like partners to you in terms of
Yeah.
getting involved with the business so it has a better outcome from their perspective and yours?
Well, so they have they have a presence on our board, so they have board seats, and that's the sort of extent of their operational involvement. It's more the board level.
Isn't that unusual though?
For them to have
Are
board
venture
seats?
capital people usually embedded in the guts of the company?
It depends. It depends, and I would caution any aspiring entrepreneurs listening to really understand that before you do the deal,
Yeah.
because there are some horror stories about VCs who they call it adding value, right?
Yeah.
But it's like
Value to who? Right.
Yeah. What's that?
Adding value to whom?
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so I think there's a big lesson of that. Number one is find someone who shares your view of the world, and where the world's going to go. Because if you have it right at the highest level, if you're aligned at the highest level, then everything else gets a lot easier. If they came in and they said, look, our view is that this is going to be a great company, and then in 3 years we want to sell it, and our view was, hey, we want to build this thing for the long run, everything else would it would never, every decision would be made in different contexts, and it'd be a nightmare.
Wouldn't work.
Yeah. And then the second point I would make is just like do the diligence on the potential investors and understand how they act and how they behave. And you alluded to that just now, but there are a lot of horror stories there. And the nice thing about the world that we live in today is that there's more money than there are opportunities to invest it. So it's actually a great time to be an entrepreneur. There's $2 trillion of dry powder that's been committed to venture capital funds that hasn't been invested yet. And the only way those VCs get paid is that if that money gets invested. So it's part of it, we're seeing crazy valuations, crazy deal activity. But there's a lot of good companies that are getting funded and getting a lot of money to really run. And it's cool to see.
Excellent. So listen, they're telling me in my other ear that we need to take a commercial break. So let the sponsors have their say. So if you give me a minute, we'll be right back with Anders Jones, CEO of Facet Wealth. So stand by, we'll be right back.
The Ask a CEO show is brought to you by Lorraine Gregory Communications, a full-service award-winning agency where experience matters. Visit them at lorrainegregory.com.
And we're back with Anders Jones, an investor, a serial entrepreneur, and the CEO of Facet Wealth. Anders, you guys are providing financial advice and content to a public in terms of helping them develop a better understanding of their personal financial well-being, right? And the management of their money. But you're not focused on the top tier. You're focused on more of a middle ground. How did you come up with that concept? Is that TAM, or is it just where your heart is?
So it's all of the above. So let me tell you a story. And this was actually the thing that led to the creation of Facet. So in 2015, the Department of Labor under the Obama administration tried to pass a rule called the Fiduciary Rule. And it was also known sometimes as the best interests rule. And it basically said this, that if you're a financial advisor, you're now legally obligated to work in the best interests or act in the best interests of your client. For a little crazy that rule didn't exist to begin with, but there we were. The crazier thing is that rule didn't pass. The pushback from the industry was so strong that it failed. And the pushback, the feedback the industry had was, if you pass this rule, you're going to have 8 million households who lose their advisor relationship because the advisor can't afford to both service them and act in their best interest at the same time. So in my mind, that's the industry very publicly admitting that they're screwing 8 million clients that have opted in and said, hey, we need financial help. We need financial advice. We need financial planning. And the industry, yeah, sure. Let me sell you an annuity at a 7% commission or, whatever it is. Yeah. And so that was when a big light bulb went off and said, wow, there's a huge systemic problem here, a structural problem in the industry, which is the cost to service a lot of clients is too high. It works if you have 10 million bucks. It doesn't work if you have 200,000 bucks. Mm-hmm. And so as it turns out, there's about 38 million households that kind of fall into our sweet spot. And these are folks who have more nuance and complexity in their financial lives than what a purely digital solution or like a DIY website can help with, but they don't have the asset level to be interesting or attractive to a traditional advisor. So it's a huge market opportunity. It's a huge need. And that's really why we exist.
I would say that that's a huge need because those people, though I don't want to say those people like I'm above that, but people who have less on the financial side need more protection.
Yeah.
Because on their own devices, they're going to park that money someplace that they have no idea what's going on. So your company, Facet Wealth, offers the alternative to that. Am I correct?
It does. And let me also go a step beyond, which is that managing money is only a tiny part of what we do. I think in the way that most people think about working with a financial advisor or wealth manager is, this is someone who's going to manage my money. We think about financial planning as a totally different thing, which is, how do we integrate into your everyday life to help you with your financial choices to help you live a better life? We view, and forgive the pun, but we view that your financial life impacts every facet of your life, everything that money touches. Think about the decisions you make on a daily basis. You're not thinking about, oh, is my 401k properly allocated? But you are thinking about, okay, how much money did I spend this week? What am I saving up for to where am I going on vacation this summer? And am I saving enough money for it? That sort of thing. There's cash flow, there's debt, there's saving for your kids' college, there's thinking about starting a family, there's all these different things that actually have very little to do with how much money you have in the market, but more about how are you behaving around money and how are you making the right decisions, and most of all, do you feel secure in the financial choices that you're making?
So you're taking a holistic approach
Yep.
to educating a section of the market that needs it the most.
Yeah.
Am I correct?
Yeah.
You're teaching them how to be about money and make wise decisions in terms of their money so that they can wind up with some.
Yeah. It's educating, and it's doing the work for them. And the idea is that you can live a better life today. Like, you don't have to sacrifice in the short term for long-term happiness. That's the whole thing. That they're like, both can be true, that you can be responsible in the long term and you can live a better life today. And call me crazy, but we talk about financial health is as important as physical health, and that access to high quality financial advice we think is as essential of a service as access to healthcare.
Well, having been on both sides of that equation, I do remember when I had 32 cents in my pocket and went to buy a pack of cigarettes or put a gallon of gas in a car to get to work. So the difference is night and day. And like you said, people need to know how to get out of that so that they can have a better life. And it's a wonderful thing that you're doing, quite frankly. I mean, I know if I was a little younger and probably back in those days, the 32-cent days, I'd be knocking at your door and say, how the hell do I do this?
Yeah, is a huge need. I mean, we can go down we can go down on the rabbit hole here, but I mean, just financial literacy in general is not in a great place.
Which brings me up to one other thing. Lately we've had investors, what do you want to call them, crowd investors, right? With that whole GameStop, Robinhood hedge fund flare up.
Yeah,
maybe you could point out why that was such a disaster for some people.
Yeah, so I have a lot of thoughts on this. I mean, I think there are a lot of weird things that were happening all at once, right? You had COVID, you had people sitting in their basements, you had Robinhood, you had stimulus checks hitting, and you had this sort of like meme culture on the internet. And it was all sort of happening all at once, and that's where you had these this flare with GameStop. It's happening again in the crypto world right now, like this week and last week. But here's my general take on it, which I think is important and actually has bigger implications, is that a lot of the things that people charged money for in the past, like access to really good financial analysis of stocks and other securities, is now basically that competitive edge or that moat is disappearing with the internet. I would argue that there's actually probably better analysis about, for instance, Tesla stock online on Twitter and Reddit by retail individual investors who just are obsessed with this than there is that's being produced by Goldman Sachs or Morgan Stanley or whoever else.
Really?
And so I think this idea that access to information is changing, and the traditional friction that existed in with this idea that you have a stockbroker who's got the hot tip, and that you had to go through that person who had the information, that doesn't exist anymore. And so you're starting to see these big shifts in the market, and I think it's really, really interesting how it's going to shake out. There are going to be blips and problems like we had with GameStop and we have with some of these cryptocurrencies. But it's really interesting to see kind of a lot of the old power structures are essentially disintegrating in front of our eyes.
Yeah, disruption is everywhere, right?
It really is, yeah.
Disruption is everywhere. So listen, so you built this great company. Tell us about the human side of it. How did you go about onboarding the people with the skill sets that you really needed? Was that a difficult process, or did you have to do some due diligence before you ever moved to Baltimore and knew what you were looking at?
So I moved to Baltimore with the bet, and this was sort of the original Baltimore bet, was that we could recruit the founding team here. And basically, at the time we needed a technical person. I don't write software, and a financial planner, because I'm not a financial planner. So if we're going to offer this service, then we better have an expert.
We should have one.
Yeah. And so we found both here, and we ended up launching with a 5-person founding team. And then, as you go along, it's interesting as you go along and you start seeing success, or you start seeing different opportunities, you sort of be like, oh, wait a second, I need a person who understands how to build a really sophisticated financial model, because now we're spending a lot of money, we're getting a bunch of different, a bunch of customers coming in, and we've got to kind of reconcile all this. So okay, time for a CFO or a finance person. And then you say, okay, we see this opportunity to help people specifically with cash flow. We need to come up with a different way of thinking about it. All right, we need a really good consumer product person who can design a great experience for cash flow analysis that doesn't exist today, and so on and so forth. So a lot of the company, the initial team building as you're building the company, is reactive, and you're looking for you sort of stumble upon a problem or an opportunity, and you've got to go find someone who can address that now. What's interesting where we are today, and I would say, we've kind of flipped from that initial product market fit phase to now the scaling phase. We now have the ability to be a lot more proactive. So we're sitting down and saying, okay, we have a pretty good sense of where this company is going to be in 12 months. But let's say, okay, we're at 8,000 customers today. We'll be at 40,000 in 12 months. What does that look like from a team standpoint? Okay, so right now we have 90 financial advisors, CFPs, who work for us. We're going to be at 200. Okay, so what does that support structure look like and all that? And then do we have the talent today to manage that bigger team, or do we need to go find someone? And so you start getting much more proactive, which it's a total mindset shift. And it took me about 3 months to really wrap my head around it.
That's not a long time, believe me.
In startup years, it's like 10 years.
So you're not only scaling the business, you're scaling the people that
100%.
you need to bring on. You need to go for the higher and higher and higher level. As your company scales, you need people with more professional skills. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a really interesting thing. So like one of our core values when we started the company was we want to build the best team we possibly can. Like we want a team of absolute A players. So we hired a lot of young people who had sort of raw talent, great energy, really gung-ho to change this industry. And by and large, that's paid off. But then we've promoted from within. So someone who was a great individual contributor is now a manager for the first time in their life. And I woke up earlier this year and realized, man, 75% of our managers, it's the first time that they're managers. And by the way, this is my first time as a CEO. So 75% of the company, including the head of the company, we're waking up every day in the biggest job of our lives. And we hadn't done a great job of really training and providing that structure around it. It's sort of like, okay, well, we figured it out as we went along up until now, so we can keep doing it. But you get to a point where that doesn't work anymore. And so a big thing for us this year has been really thinking about how do we invest in growing our team. And also we're at a stage now where we can bring in outsiders who have done this before. So, you get someone who's seen it before and done it before, and you get that level of experience. And then you've got these really talented people who haven't done it before, and you put them together and just amazing things start happening.
It's so interesting because, over the years, I've worked with an awful lot of nonprofits, which you would think wouldn't be analogous, right? However, I would always go into a nonprofit and find somebody who's been there for 20 something years and now is a director and doesn't have a clue because they were just there and they kept putting them in higher, more and more responsible places. And it's hard to say to some lady who devoted her life to a nonprofit, you don't fit anymore. That's tough. It's tough to do.
Yeah.
So, how do you got somebody who moved up to manager and they're not going to make it to the vice president level or the director level, right? So it's a difficult realization to get the right people in the right seats on the bus. And that's the hard part of being a CEO, I think.
It really is. It's the love and the hurt of it. And some of my proudest accomplishments are the people that I've really mentored and seen grow. And some of the hardest moments have been telling people that, have worked really hard for the company, hey, you know what? You kind of tapped out and the company's moved past you.
Yeah.
It's tough.
It is tough. My brother used to be a corporate VP at defunct Payne-Weber, and he ran about 600 people, and he said that was the worst part of his job.
Yeah.
He's doing that because everybody works so hard for him to hit the numbers, to make everything work. And when he had to say, you know what, he said he dreaded it. He absolutely dreaded it.
Yeah. It's interesting. One of the benefits of being in a startup is that you're on a certain trajectory where every 3 to 6 months the world changes a little bit. And so the skill sets change,
Mm,
the needs change, that sort of thing. And so one of the things that we started doing is when we bring someone on, we say, look, this is the job as it exists today. This is what we think it's going to be 12 months from now. We hired you because we know you can do the job today, and we are pretty sure you can do it in 12 months. 24 months, who knows? And we're going to ask you to do the best work of your career when you come work for us. And our commitment back to you, we view it as a two-way contract. Our commitment back to you is that we will do everything we possibly can to get you to the point where you will be able to do the job in 24 months. We will grow you as an individual and as a manager, as a leader, to be able to do the bigger job. And if we ever get to a point where it looks like that's not going to work, we will tell you right away, and we will help you find another job. So it's like when you set that expectation ahead of time and say, look, we are behind you 100%. Even if it doesn't work, we're still gonna.
we're not gonna throw you under the bus.
It creates.
We're gonna buy you a ticket on the bus. Yeah.
Yeah. It creates a different mentality with our employees, and it's been really powerful. It's a weird conversation to have when on someone's first day, but it works.
Again, I'm going to go back to my brother. He said, when you interview somebody, you have to tell them, listen, I'm not going to ask you to do anything that I would not do.
Yeah.
I'm not so sure what that might be, but be open to it. If
Yeah.
you're not open to it, okay, see you later. Anyhow, so listen, growing your company's got to be super exciting, but the challenges that you face every day, how do you go about handling those challenges that come at you from every different direction every single day without getting burnt out?
That's a good question. And my answer has evolved has evolved a bit over time. When you're first starting, you don't really have a choice because either you fix it or the company dies. And then you get to a point where, and I think we're, knock on wood at this point, where there's not a whole lot that's like an existential threat to us. So it's really just a question of like, how big can you get and how fast can you get there? And then you have to really kind of start pacing yourself. Okay, we're in the marathon phase now. And I think it's important to recognize that. A couple things for me. So one is, we have an unlimited vacation policy. So basically you can take as much as you want as long as your work gets done. And it's a way of saying to our employees, hey, we trust you. The interesting thing about that is that no one ever takes vacation. And I actually think that's a bad thing. And so we're now starting to mandate, we're going to start to mandate you have to take at least 2 weeks. And so I'm going to start taking 2 weeks myself and actually like force myself to unplug and not respond to emails and that sort of thing, which I haven't done yet.
Good luck with that.
Yeah, I think it's spoken like a CEO. You know how it goes. It's hard to do. But the other thing too is on a weekly basis, I schedule empty time into my calendar. Because I think for me, a lot of burnout is when you're doing, putting your head down, and you don't take time to step back and think strategically. You don't have a great sense of where you're going, and then you go down the wrong path, and then it's like everything falls apart, and then it's like, oh man, we got to start all over again. Okay. And so having this ability to kind of zoom in and zoom out on a frequent basis and think about detail stuff, but then think about big picture stuff, I think that's incredibly useful. And so for me, I schedule every Wednesday morning and all day Friday. I don't schedule any meetings. And I sometimes, like on Wednesday mornings, I usually just sit in my chair with a cup of coffee and a notepad and just see what comes to me. And it's amazing how sometimes ideas get connected in your head that in the moment didn't occur to you, but when you have time, It works.
Well, the pad is handy to have because half the time they're going to go in this here, and by the time you get to your office, it's already gone. So listen, so you're going to take there you go.
Yeah.
You're going to take a vacation. So what is
I
that?
mean, in theory, yeah.
What does rest, relaxation, and recreation look like to you?
So I spend a lot of time with my pets. I have a couple of dogs, and I actually have a horse, believe it or not.
Yeah.
And I just love horses. There's something about them that's so
I
relaxing.
had three. I
Really?
used to live up in the Adirondacks, and the first thing I did was built a barn,
Yeah.
and I actually had three horses. I loved them to death.
There's something about it that's just so I don't know. There's what's the Winston Churchill quote, right? There's something about the outside of a horse that's good for the inside of a man.
Exactly correct.
So so I spent a lot of time, with them, and then I love to read. I block out every Sunday morning to read, and that goes back to the early comment about always learning, right?
Yeah.
And that's always
Yeah.
it's always interesting. So
All right.
yeah.
So listen, so the audience that we've made up of CEOs and people on their journey to this corner office. So in closing, I always ask the guest the same question, and you can answer it personally, business-wise, or a combination of both, right? What's the best piece of advice you ever got?
This is it's a pithy one, but it's always trust your gut when it's negative, never trust it when it's positive.
I love it.
Yeah.
That's a really good one. I love it. I'm going to steal that.
Please do. It works in every situation you can think of.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Very good. Anders, I really appreciate you coming on the show today. I know I've taken up an awful lot of your time.
No,
The conversation was going well. I usually try to keep it a half an hour, but we're well beyond that because we are having such a good time. So listen, I'm going to give you the floor. It's your time. Tell people how to get a hold of you, how to interact with Facet Wealth, and you got the time.
Yeah, no, thank you. So it's great to be on. If you're interested in learning more about Facet as a customer or as a potential employee, we're hiring like crazy right now. Facetwealth.com. You can schedule an intro call with one of our client success managers if you're interested in becoming a client. And then there's a whole team and jobs page if you're interested in coming to work for us. You can find me on Twitter at Anders Jones. I don't really tweet much, but I'm on there. And yeah, happy to answer any questions that may come up.
Terrific. Anders, thank you so much. Well, everybody, that's a wrap. So don't miss any of our upcoming Ask a CEO interviews. We have a great guest lined up from all kinds of industries all over the world. The video interviews are available on YouTube at Greg's Corner Office and as a podcast on Apple, Spotify, and all the streaming services. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, share, and like far and wide, and we'll see you next time.